bottom of page 5 in unit 4, we're continuing. The Gemara asks, we just read the Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara in Gittin asked, how can it be that Hillel HaZaken creates a prosbul? Right, it's against the Torah. Says Abai, nah, it's Shmita. Shmita nowadays is not Doraita, for whatever reason. Not going to go through that again at the moment. It's not Doraita, so it's not against the Torah, it's against Chazal. So not as bad. All right. Now, the Gemara continues. We're at the bottom of page 5 over here.
It's against the ideals of the Torah you ultimately wish for, but Shmita with the right, I still think we would have to.
That's a very, very big question. That's a very big question, very good question. I'd say like this. Broadly speaking, it's a very disturbing thing. That's the truth. It's very, the whole thing is very.
Even if it was the right to have it.
No, disturbing because like this. I'll explain what I mean. Earlier, I said that the rabbis should be the ones who are proactive and make sure that and make sure that the Torah works with reality. Now, I think it's very, very good. I think it's a great ideal that in our society we really do believe in giving loans interest-free. When it comes to banks, it's a different story. Fine, I can live with that. To say there's a difference between corporations and personal loans. We should all be giving personal loans interest-free. Anyone who has the money and can help someone out and get a loan and return the loan interest-free, great. When you're talking about corporations, you're talking about building things, you're talking about creating an economy, is a different story. I have no problem with that division. No, that's fine. I'm fine with that. The other example I mentioned is heter mechira. So there, theoretically, we'd say there's a bracha, a special bracha we get. That's the Torah says, right? Special bracha you get in the crops in the 6th year and the 7th year on their own, that you simply won't have to work during Shmita and everything will work. So great. So Bezrat Hashem, when Shmita is now, so the Chazon Ish says, the Sma says, the Chazon Ish say, when Shmita is Doraita, you get the bracha. Nowadays, you're just doing it Derabanan, so you don't get the bracha. And that's why you have to find these solutions. I'm fine with that, as long as you can really count on the bracha. But the way we learn Hillel HaZaken is the Torah says, give a loan and don't ask for it back. Fine. Now, then comes Hillel and says, look, your socialist ideas are beautiful. They just don't work in the real world. Right? Yeah. Thank you. Now, but hold on, who's he talking to? To Hashem. Like,
no, but
you're saying Hashem is disconnected from reality?
Yeah, but can't you just say the same thing?
Hashem created reality. The same psyche that doesn't work with this idea, the socialist idea, is the psyche that Hashem created.
Why do we still chametz Pesach is right?
So also chametz, I have no problem with saying personally you should get rid of every single bottle of whiskey you have. Sorry. But right? But angel can't, right? But angel can't. So that also there I can see how I say, no, really you must beat every personal bit of chametz you really should destroy utterly. And there are people who are allowed to own the chametz during Pesach, and in terms of corporations, you need to sell that to the people who are allowed, the goyim, who are allowed to own it. I have no problem with that. My problem is when you say, no, this idea is nice and socialist, but it just doesn't work in the real world. And Hashem was not aware of that. Unless you say the same answer I said for heter iska, for heter mechira.
We're just not at the level. Just because the ideal, it's ideal that we get rid of our chametz. It's ideal that we give a loan. All these things are ideal, but I don't think it's against the Torah to create to create something so that we can maintain not ownership but get the chametz back after Pesach. And it's not against the Torah to create a principle. It's just not the ideal.
And the Torah, like you say, it's an ideal, but the Torah already knew that this ideal won't be able to function for the whole time. So already in the Torah, it's already built in this kind
built in the solutions.
Loopholes that you can to go around with and find it.
Right,
And then
so that you could-
Against the power to do it, but there should be kind of an idea what it's supposed to be, what is the best
Yes, sir.
possibility.
Yefa. Okay.
I think that's all I want to say.
Yefa. All right. Yefa. That's Yefa. You're saying the same Hashem who created reality was aware that reality won't really work with this, and therefore created the loophole. Right. I hear.
That's what Hashem said you were going to say.
Right, I hear. All right. Yefa. Okay. Let's continue from the bottom of page 5. Ask the Gemara, Mika Midi, at the bottom of page 5. So now the Gemara asks the opposite. It says, hold on. So you're saying Shmita nowadays is Derabanan, yes? Right? Shmita is Derabanan. The Torah tells you, so let's say I take a loan from Glenn, right? Right? Now, at the end of the year, depending on your part, I think, I take a loan from Glenn. Now, at the end of the year, what really happens at the end of this year? What's really going to happen? Yeah, this year. At the end of this year, what's really going to happen? I'm saying specifically this year, not generally. What?
You don't have to give it back.
I don't have to give it back. Wait, midoraita? Midoraita, I have to give it back. Why? So, according to Abaye, we just read Abaye, who says that Shmita Ksafim is Derabanan nowadays, right? So, wait, what is the truth? You see, beyond on the other side of this wall, there's a Beit Din, right? When you ask the Dayan, what is the truth? Do I still owe Glenn the money or not? That's the Gemara's question here. It says, wait, hold on. The Torah doesn't recognize the Shmitat Ksafim, right? So
The truth is, you always owe the money.
so what happened here? Do I truly owe the money or not? All right. So let's see the Gemara's answer. Hold on. Okay. So Abaye says the Erich, what you said. Abaye says, let's read Abaye. Abaye says Sheval Taseh, meaning the Gemara's question is, how can Chazal say that this money that I owe Glenn midoraita legamre and should be collectible as well? How can Chazal tell me don't collect it? So Abaye says they're just saying don't collect it, and that Chazal have the power to say don't do something, right? Refrain from doing something. Chazal have that power, right? But Chazal have that power to create a takana, right? To tell him don't sue. Chazal have the power to do that. Right. He needs to ignore that exactly. Right. Now, Rava says, yeah, we'll get. I don't want to go into all the details right now. I just want to read about and Rava. Yeah, you're right. But again, I don't want to go deep into Prusbul at the moment. And that's Abaye. Rava amar hefker beidin hefker. What does that mean? At the bottom page 5, mamash last line of page 5. Mamash last line. Hefker beidin hefker meaning hefker beidin hefker. Chazal have the power to mafkir, right? To mafkir things. What does that mean? What's the answer?
The money from me. Run away from me and give it to the lender.
The borrower, right? So there are two ways of reading Rava. One way of reading Rava is, right? We said Shmita really is Derabanan. So how can Chazal say you no longer owe the money? And the answer is Chazal have the power to do that because they have control of the Hefker Beidin. They have control to say, yeah, it's Hefker, right? The Mafkir, you gave me a loan. Now we're Mafkir the loan. Now the money is mine. Legamre. Right? Chazal have that power.
He's coming to me and saying, he's going to him and saying,
the Hefker Beidin. That Chazal, when Chazal say, the question is how do you implement Shmitat Ksafim Derabanan? How does that work? That's the Gemara's question. And the answer is, yeah, Chazal have that power over money. When it comes to money, Chazal can play around with it. They have the money Chazal have the power to, what's the word for Hefker, to like annul your ownership of your money. Now, there are two ways of reading Rava. One way of reading Rava is the way I read him now. The other way of reading Rava is as follows. The Gemara asked on page 3, how can it be that midoraita Shmita still happens and Hillel says no, Shmitat Ksafim is not happening? Rava answers, Efkel Bedin Haya Efkel. You see what I did there? The Gemara asked, how can Hillel go against the Torah? Abai says, nah, it's not against the Torah, it's against Chazal. Let's not get carried away, right? And the Gemara says, okay, against Chazal, but how did Chazal invent Shmitat Ksafim? And then Abai says, Sheval Taisa, Rava says, Efkel Bedin. It's one way of reading the Gemara. Another way of reading the Gemara is that the Gemara says, how did Hillel go against the Torah? Abai says, not against the Torah, it's against Chazal. And you say, wait, Chazal really created this thing? Abai says, yeah, Sheval Taisa. Rava says, Shmita's Doraita. This whole business with Shmita, Derabanan, forget that. How can Hillel go against the Torah? Very easy. That's it. So there, two ways of reading Rava. Says Rashi, see in page 6. Rava amar le'olam. Ben Derabanan de pliga de Rabbi. Who's Rabbanan? Who's Rabbanan de pliga de Rabbi? Rabbanan Chachamim who are against Rabbi. Who are Chachamim against Rabbi? Who's that? No, say better. You're almost there, but say better. One step more. So Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so both Philip and Dr. Daniel both said Rabbi Yossi. But who? Say better. Remember the beginning of the page, we said that Shmita is not dependent on Yuvam? Chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda. So, Ben Derabanan Pliga de Rabbi V'amri Shvita Ashmatat Milve B'zman Zeh Deoraita. Kin Hillel de lo teshamet. Rabbi D'amar lav Deoraita. So he says, I don't need Rabbi, I don't need Rabbi, forget all that. Meaning, when Rava speaks here, he's speaking not against the second part of Abai, the first part. Now, you might say, Tov, you're being very nitpicky today. At first, I said it's Rashi, started with Rabbi, moves on from Rabbi, fine. But now this, come on, you're spending so much time on what does Abai say, what does Rava say? Right? Why am I being so nitpicky? Should I tell you why I'm being so nitpicky? Because this is a crucial part in the sugya. I'll explain why. Again, the Gemara asks, how can you create a pros bullets against the Torah? Says Abai, no, Shmita is not Doraita. Does Rava agree with that? If Rava agrees with that, so Abai and Rava both agree that Shmita nowadays is not Doraita, great. But Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi says no. Rava is disagreeing with Abai. Right? And says...
disagreeing that it's against the Torah.
I'm not,
there may be something else.
You're stuck with that point, but just 1 second, Rashi is saying,
Rava doesn't decide.
well, why?
It doesn't decide. It says both ways are good. I don't care.
Right, but then that opens the way to have let's just skip to the Itur, so you'll see where I'm going with all this. You see the Itur 2 sources later. And the line, Rava amar afka b'din ifker, umatnit afilu b'zman shvat karka, inami afilu b'zman hazeh v'ali b'derabanan. Right, as Philip said, while Rava is inconclusive, right? Shmita, according to Rava. If you have machloket Abai and Rava, halacha is like Rava, right? So according to Rava, Shmita nowadays Doraita or Derabanan. So this part of the Itur sounds inconclusive, but see the next part in the Itur. לרבי אתה משמיט כספים אפילו בחוץ לארץ מדרבנן, לרבנן דפליגי דרבי אפילו מדאורייתא, אבל יובל לא נוהג וכולי, קיים עלן הלכה כרבי מחברו ולא מחבריו. So who are we holding like? Like Chachamim. According to the Itur, Shmita nowadays is Doraita. Why? Because Rava disagrees with Abaye. Why? Because Rava has to answer because Abaye, again, we started everything with saying there's a machloket between Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim against Rabbi. Rabbi says that Shmita depends on the Dvar Shmita Shamot, right? That Shmita depends maybe on Yuvel, Chora. right? And Abaye and Rabbi Yehuda and Chachamim say no. Shmita is independent. Abaye, if we read the sugya saying everyone accepts Rabbi, Abaye and Rava both accept Rabbi, so you could ask why would everyone accept Rabbi? Good question, but they do, and you're good, right? That's what Tosfot's going to do. I'll show that next time. But the Itur and Rashi, they say no. Rava wants to answer how would Hillel work this one someone pointed out earlier. I think it was you, Gaxi, pointed out, oh, no, it was Philip, whatever, that Hillel Zaken himself wouldn't agree with Hillel, right? According to Rashi, Hillel Zaken himself wouldn't agree with Abaye, right? Rebbe himself couldn't explain Hillel the way Abaye explained Hillel. So we still have to ask, how did Rebbe explain Hillel, right? There's Chachamim who disagree with Rebbe. How do they explain Hillel Zaken? You have to have another solution. You have to have another explanation. So Rava gives the alternative explanation, says the Itur well, and so halacha is like Rava, first of all. Now you said Rava is inconclusive. You say beseder, because regardless of whether you hold like Rabbi or Chacham, you could always explain like this. Rabbi can also explain this. It says the Itur right. But if you really think there's a real machlok between Rabbi and Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, so halacha will be like Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, it's not. I'm not just being nitpicky here. Abaye says Shmita nowadays is Derabanan, and we had the whole construct with Rashi why that happens. And Rava, according to Rashi and the Itur, says no. Shmita nowadays is Doraita. Except Rashi has one saving grace. In that sense, which is that there's no Kedushat Aretz according to Rashi nowadays, right? We started the whole thing saying Rambam holds that nowadays Kedushat Aretz, and Rashi says there isn't. So Rashi, what will save Rashi from Shmita nowadays is only the issue of Kedushat Haaretz. It will be a question unto itself. But so just to sum that up, the Gemara asks, how can Hillel do the takana? And the answer is, oh, Shmita is Derabanan. The Gemara asks another question, wait, so how do Chazal do this? And the question is how to read the next machloket. According to Abaye, yeah, Shmita is Derabanan. According to one way of reading the Gemara, I'll just show you a quick look at the Tosfot here. The Tosfot that we skipped. Hashta, at this point, the beginning of the Gemara, the beginning of the Sugya, meaning, Tosfot explained that Rava didn't think Hefker Beidin is a good answer for the Gemara's initial question. The Gemara asked, how can Hillel go against the Torah? So the way Rashi and the Itur read Rava was, yeah, you can go against the Torah. It's money. Money. When it comes to money, Chazal can go against the Torah. That's the way Rashi and the Itur understand Rava. Tosfot say, nah, Rava wouldn't do that. It's too extreme. I mean, come on, like, right? You see what I'm saying? That's what he says, right? It can't be that you just say, yeah, Hefker Beidin. So sure, like we could ignore any monetary issue in the right. You could just ignore. Rava wouldn't do that, which means Tosfot disagree and say no. Rava disagrees with Rava agrees with Abaye. That's only Shmita nowadays Derabanan. I just want to sum up this point, then I'll answer, and then I'll ask Rav Baruch to. That's what he wanted to say. The Gemara. So just to sum up the crucial point here, the Gemara asks, how can Hillel go against the Torah? Abaye says not against the Torah. Shmita is Derabanan for whatever reason. Then the Gemara asks, okay, so how did Chazal create the Shmita? Shmita Ksafim. Abaye says Shaval Taiseh. Rava answers the question. The question is, what question is Rava answering? If he's answering the first question, so he's saying, no, Shmita can be Doraita. If it can be Doraita, it will be Doraita. Or he's answering the side, that's he's answering the first question. According to Tosfot, no, he's answering the second question. He accepts that Shmita nowadays is Derabanan. The question is only a technical question of, so how do you implement the prosbulin? How do you create Shmitat Ksafim in the context of Shmita being Derabanan?